Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. When will this whirlwind of events that has swept over my life finally cease? Eleanor had always preferred a slow, orderly pace to her days. Even going to work, she didn't rush headlong like most people, but left well in advance so she could take not the shortest, but the most picturesque route, past the ponds whose surface was dotted with water lilies, where she could feed the impudent ducks. She admired the ripples on the water, the blue of the sky, the flowers, and the cats she met along the way. And a couple of times she even arrived late for work. Her friend Martha would chuckle, but without malice. "You, Ellie, are definitely from the last century. You should have been born a young lady in the 18th century. You'd stroll around with a fan, embroider with pearls on velvet. If your dowry was good, no troubles at all." "Honestly, I wouldn't mind that at all," Eleanor agreed. And then, by an irony of fate, she was to come into an inheritance. Her grandmother from the capital, her father's mother, who had outlived her own son by 10 years, had passed away. Eleanor felt awkward because she didn't feel grief, which she admitted to Martha. But her friend just waved it away. "Oh, come on. You're too hard on yourself. You barely knew this grandmother. Now, I had a real grandmother, a country one. If I asked her to babysit, she could come even on a passing truck, and with pies from a Russian stove, too. And she had so much warmth. Of course, I wouldn't have cried for her when she was gone. But your Beatrice hardly kept in touch with you. You see, she thought her daughter-in-law was unsuitable." "Martha, about the departed, either speak well or not at all," Eleanor reminded her. "The full saying goes, about the dead, either speak well or nothing, except the truth. Google it if you don't believe me," Martha advised. "As for you getting to know and love her, she didn't bother with that herself. Apparently, she didn't need it. It's good she at least wrote the will in your name. That was good of her. Otherwise, your father has some third cousins, you said. Your B could have left everything to them out of spite. But she acted humanely. So rejoice in your good fortune and remember your deceased grandmother with a kind word. Everyone would wish for such a long and prosperous life." Indeed, Martha is right. Being happy about the inheritance doesn't mean being happy about grandmother Beatrice's death. Jenny, Eleanor's mother, called her mother-in-law the Queen of Spades. Absolutely without a malicious smirk or resentment, rather with a hint of respect. Beatrice was exactly that type. Perhaps, of course, it was an artistically played role, but now that secret was gone with her. She lived to be 90, was married more than once, increasing her wealth and useful connections with each new spouse. From her first husband, she even had a child, Eleanor's father. "I didn't want children. You were an accident," she confessed to her son without a hint of embarrassment, having decided to give birth. As one of the distant relatives recounted at the funeral, a week before her death, B was still calling for a manicurist and pedicurist. Eleanor was a little put off by this topic at such a moment, but Jennifer said that her mother-in-law herself would have understood perfectly and wouldn't have been offended in the least. Rather, she would have bestowed a satisfied smirk on the storyteller from her inscrutable face. When they were returning home in a third-class carriage after the funeral, Eleanor asked her mother, "Mom, how did you manage not to feel dislike for grandmother? I understand intellectually that I shouldn't attach importance to my mother-in-law's words, but sometimes I just hate her." "Ellie, you just live too close and see each other too often." Mom smiled tiredly. "Patricia is not a bad woman, but she doesn't have a life of her own, so she tries to interfere in yours. And why should I be offended by my mother-in-law? I'm grateful to Beatrice that she never interfered in my life with your father, never tried to divorce us. Although most of my friends were sure that's what would happen. They thought that since I was from a funny little province, she would constantly remind him of it. They scared me terribly. But nothing of the sort happened. Beatrice was too busy with herself and her life to waste time on me. An egoistic mother-in-law who lives for herself is sometimes very good indeed. So I can honestly tell everyone, I had a very good mother-in-law. And for leaving her granddaughter an inheritance, I respect her even more now. Not a petty lady, and honest. She didn't maintain relations for appearances, but she acknowledged you. I think, in fact, she even liked you. Eleanor didn't see Grandmother Beatrice often, maybe 5 or 6 times in her life, and didn't notice that she particularly liked her. No grandmothers, please, Beatrice said when she met her 7-year-old granddaughter. Just call me Beatrice, like everyone else. And Eleanor called her Beatrice, like everyone else, but used the formal you. Madame Beatrice had no objection to this. Will you tell David and your mother-in-law that Beatrice left you an inheritance? Jennifer asked with unconcealed pleasure, sipping strong tea from a glass with a holder, as if it were a cocktail in an expensive bar. Mom once confessed, laughing sheepishly, that she had loved drinking tea on trains since childhood. It had always seemed tastier to her throughout her life. I won't say anything yet. Eleanor shared her thoughts. The will is sealed. No one knows its contents. Maybe they only left me some memento. I wasn't expecting anything at all, so I'll accept any surprise calmly. But my mother-in-law will definitely get another reason to be displeased with me then. Suddenly, I might turn out to be not only an inattentive wife and irresponsible mother, but also an unloved, unsuccessful granddaughter. Mother and daughter laughed quietly, understanding each other without words. All right, indeed. There's no need to rush, Mom agreed. What's ours won't leave us, and we don't need what's someone else's. And they agreed not to bring up the topic until the will was read. But 2 days before the date set by the notary, Eleanor's son, Leo, ended up in the hospital with acute poisoning. His mother-in-law screamed that the cause was poor-quality treats at a children's birthday party Leo had been invited to. And of course, if Eleanor were a truly good mother, she would keep track of which family's children her son associated with. Eleanor found it amusing to even suggest that a 10-year-old could develop some kind of dangerous social circle, but her mother-in-law nodded seriously, just to avoid pointless arguments. The birthday boy was Leo's good friend and classmate Sam. If Sam's mother, who is raising him alone, bought a cake at a big discount, that doesn't mean Sam's mother is to blame for the cake sold in the store being expired. But whatever the case, Leo was in the hospital, was already out of danger, and was starting to get bored. And Eleanor was just supposed to go to the notary for the reading of the will. David, as usual, grumbled something about her job being terribly inconvenient for a married woman, but agreed to stop by to support his son. Eleanor woke up very early that morning and, while coffee was simmering over a low heat, she turned the train ticket over in her hands and was sad that she wouldn't be able to visit Leo in the hospital. Of course, she understood intellectually. Tomorrow, Dad would visit him instead of Mom. But it was still sad. Life flows so fast. Soon Leo would stop being a child, would be perfectly fine without his mom, wouldn't miss her as much, and she wouldn't even have time to remember his childhood. It was either work or all sorts of silly, urgent matters. Eleanor's sad reflections were interrupted by a phone call. Ms. Eleanor, I apologize for the unpleasant news, the notary apologized. As I explained to you, at least 2 witnesses are needed for the reading of a sealed will, but one of them is currently ill. Nothing serious happened to him? Eleanor asked. My son is also in the hospital, poisoned. I sympathize. May he recover quickly? The notary replied politely. There's nothing dangerous with the witness, just a fever. But in this heat. He's an elderly person, concerned about his health, and asks to postpone the date of the will reading. He suggested moving the event exactly 1 week, provided that suits you. Yes, I'll arrange it at work, Eleanor agreed, not liking to be capricious or disrupt others' plans without reason. And today I'd better stay with my son, so everything is fine. Please convey my wishes for recovery to the witness. She genuinely didn't care at all about going after some phantom inheritance while her son was in the hospital. He hadn't yet crossed that invisible barrier where the possibility of getting money becomes a justification for a person if they leave someone close to them bored and alone. Eleanor exhaled with relief, drank a second cup of coffee with milk foam, and set off to surprise Leo with a visit. If her little son was still aching somewhere, it would definitely pass after their meeting. The hospital elevator for visitors wasn't working. Eleanor didn't understand how to call the side one where gurneys with patients were loaded. She generally felt extremely anxious and uncomfortable in hospitals, and considered herself one of those people who could never become medical professionals. Eleanor decided to go up to the 3rd floor she needed by the stairs, on foot. On the windows between the first 2 floors, she was met by melancholy, withered roses. Hearing voices, she stopped for some reason, instead of walking faster. The voices were coming from the windows between the 2nd and 3rd floors. Her husband David and her mother-in-law Patricia Ann were talking. Hearing the very first few words, Eleanor froze under the stairs and thanked herself for choosing silent sneakers for this trip. "David, I wouldn't wish you ill," his mother-in-law persuaded him quietly but insistently. "I will always be on your side, whatever you decide. But now I'm asking you to take a break and not rush. Can't you guess why?" "Mom, what's with your love for talking in riddles?" David complained lazily. "What am I supposed to guess?" "About the fact that your wife might now be among the heirs after the death of her Moscow grandmother. Did you really not think about that? Honestly, how did you live to be 40 like this, huh?" "Mom, don't start. You've brilliantly chosen the time and place. We're actually visiting my son and your grandson in the hospital." "Exactly," his mother-in-law triumphantly picked up. "Don't forget that you and Eleanor have a son. I'm also a living person. I understand everything perfectly. Love has struck and all that. And you know perfectly well that I don't see it as a red flag that you have a child. Leo has a right to his father until he comes of age, and to a share of your property. And so you marry this Sarah of yours, the initial raptures of love will pass. And what will happen? It will turn out that these alimony payments and gifts for the child annoy her, and in general, she'll want her own child. And you still have to raise Leo. And all this on your salary alone. Listen, Sarah doesn't want children. She just wants to live with me without this silly game of hide and seek." A woman who doesn't want children is also suspicious. Either your beautiful Sarah darling is a complete egoist, or she's lying to you so as not to scare you away. "You're our psychic, Baba Vanga," David snorted. "You know everything about everyone. You've got it all sorted out." "Yes, I've lived longer, and I know," his mother-in-law stated with her favorite expression, which Eleanor had heard from her many times and always wanted to argue with. But her own family peace was more precious. "Listen to your mother for once in your life. I know grandmothers like Eleanor's was. All huffy-sniffy, but essentially just an old woman. In old age, the same thoughts come to everyone anyway. She probably wanted to be remembered well by her granddaughter and left something. Her apartment or savings. Or maybe both." "No, Mom, I don't understand now," David interrupted Patricia Ann. "Do you want your son to give up the woman he loves so he can use his wife's inheritance? Am I some kind of gigolo, in your opinion?" "You're stupid as a teenager, in my opinion," his mother-in-law replied angrily. "One would think you were suffering with Eleanor before you met Sarah. You just lived your lives. And with good means, you would have lived even better. With money, there are fewer arguments." I don't know. And Sarah is hardly ideal, so I don't see the point in swapping a needle for a bar of soap. Did you only live with my father for that reason too? David sneered. What do I and your father have to do with this? Eleanor flinched, hearing quick footsteps below. Several people were coming up the stairs quite close by. They were walking quickly and talking quite loudly. David and his mother-in-law couldn't help but hear them and stopped their conversation. Eleanor decided to wait until these people were level with her. She crouched down and pretended that an untied shoelace was delaying her. 2 doctors and a nurse were coming up the stairs. Eleanor's shoelaces were immediately in perfect order, and she continued on her way right behind the medical staff. Well, that's a decision, her friend Martha said with bewildered admiration, hearing Eleanor's story. If I hadn't heard it from you yourself, I wouldn't have believed you'd dare to leave like that, and you even had the patience to wait almost a month. I wouldn't have lasted. I would have given myself away long ago. But you surprised me, Ellie. I was sure I knew you as well as I know myself, but you're revealing a completely unexpected side. I didn't expect it from myself either. Eleanor smiled sadly. I like to think of myself as a gentle young lady who can't stand making decisions herself. And what will you tell Leo? A gentle young lady, Martha thought. Already like that? That's why I waited a month, so Leo would go to his session at the sports camp. His friend from class's parents recently divorced. His dad is already living with another woman. Leo himself told me. He's worried about his friend, but he understands that these things happen. Ah, he's level-headed for his age, Martha agreed. So I thought, if I leave now, and David will almost certainly be living with Sarah, I won't have to invent lies for my son. I was already worn out waiting for David to honestly say, now you're a woman of means, it won't be so scary for you to be alone, and I can admit that I've fallen in love with someone else. But he, apparently, decided to follow his mommy's advice after all. When he was arguing with her and playing the nobleman, he simply didn't know what my inheritance was. Stop tormenting yourself, Martha tried to stop her friend. You chew on this every day. Have some pity on yourself. Martha, darling, I pity myself, and I pity this Sarah. That's why I need a little more time to whine, and then I'll calm down, Eleanor assured her. Why pity Sarah? Her friend snorted. She's getting involved with a married man. She should be ready for all sorts of obstacles. I know my David, well, not mine anymore, perfectly well. He can convince anyone of his feelings if he sets his mind to it. I remember that from my own experience. And Sarah was probably sure of him. But he traded her for his wife's inheritance, for the opportunity to live comfortably, to buy a new car, for example. He's already quietly started testing the waters, asking if his beloved little wife wouldn't like a brand new car instead of the old one. That's when I was closer than ever to giving myself away. I look at him and think, if the elevator in the hospital had been working then, I wouldn't have heard his conversation with his mother. I would be living and rejoicing now. How good everything is for us. What a close-knit, loving family we are. And it's terrifying to think that I could have lived my whole life with this hypocrite, and even sometimes thought I was happy. Somehow everything is always complicated for you. Martha shook her head. You could have lived. You could have. If you found out everything, you'd leave yourself. You're not expecting financial problems. That's it. Live and be happy. Something tells me that the revelation of David's character shocked you so much that you won't grieve for him. Yes, I won't now, Eleanor agreed calmly. Not with Leo's inheritance secured, unlike my own. Exactly. Martha raised a forefinger to the sky. So you didn't have any other option besides divorce anyway. And this way, at least you'll leave first, with the feeling of a winner. Yes, I approve of your decision. To be honest, Eleanor's own idea seemed very simple to her, without much imagination. When David came home from work the next day, he froze on the threshold, not knowing how to react to what he saw. Firstly, this wasn't a case where a man might not notice his wife had changed her hairstyle. For as long as he had known Eleanor, she had always had thick, almost waist-length, dark blonde hair. Now half the length was cut off, and the unusually uneven strands, styled in a lush cascade, shimmered with a rich dark red, fiery color. A surprised David admitted, without much pleasure, that such changes had turned his wife into a striking beauty. Furthermore, she was wearing a green dress that resembled a long, loose tank top, and it also suited her very well. Although it was nothing like her previous clothes, it emphasized her figure too much. Standing in front of the wide-open closet, Eleanor declared to her husband instead of a greeting, "Well, I've thrown out more than half of the unnecessary rags, and I can go now." "Go where?" David asked, suddenly starting to feel like some kind of fooled ass. "To Moscow, to see my apartments, both the main one and the studio that's being rented out. And the dacha, while I'm at it. I'm thinking of renting it out for a month, or maybe keeping it for myself altogether, maybe moving there as an option. Enroll Leo in a Moscow gymnasium." "Are you going to decide this unilaterally?" David asked pointedly about Leo. "No, of course not," Eleanor reassured him. "You are his full parent. That will always be the case. As for my real estate and bank deposit, of course, I'll decide that myself." "And they gave you leave just like that?" David snorted skeptically, trying not to give away his complete bewilderment. "You're irreplaceable. You yourself assured me of that before." "I'm surprised. I asked for leave and they gave it to me right away. Perhaps the management suspects I might quit now and are trying to keep me with kindness. Although thoughts of quitting and moving are indeed visiting me more and more often." "And you didn't even think to share them with me? Or at least warn me that you were going to Moscow?" "Perhaps only tomorrow, so you can consider yourself warned in advance." "And how long are you planning to stay there, in your capitals? You were already there a month ago when the will was to be read. Will you just hang around every month?" "I don't know exactly yet. There are too many things to do, and I'm inexperienced in such matters. Grandmother's lawyers will advise me." "I see. Well, you had to go sometime." David closed off. "Did you think to prepare anything for me to eat? At least for 5 days?" "David, well, the whole freezer is full. Cook whatever you want." "And don't you think you're behaving badly?" David tried to go on the offensive. "No, I don't." Eleanor smiled friendly. "Or do you deliberately want to quarrel? This sudden change. You've adopted this new tone in conversation. Do you feel rich and independent?" "Don't envy me so obviously." Eleanor winked at her husband just as friendly. "I'm genuinely tired and don't want any quarrels or sorting things out. I just want to calmly pack and leave for my affairs." "Fine, go. Just don't be surprised by what you see when you get back." "Excellent!" Eleanor smiled carelessly. "Relax. Don't be such a bore." David fell silent, snorted severely, and didn't utter a word to his wife until nightfall. He sat down at the computer to play his favorite strategy game, which she couldn't stand, considering it too aggressive. Eleanor paid no attention to anything, packing for half the night. In the morning, when David was still sleeping, nose buried in the pillow, he opened his eyes and saw skillfully made-up Eleanor in a tank top and jeans. "Bye-bye, I'm off." She waved her hand cheerfully in front of her husband's nose, grabbed her wheeled bag, and headed for the front door with a dancing gait. Even the squeak of the key in the lock seemed mockingly cheerful to David. She was happy to be leaving, and wasn't even trying to hide it. Had she managed to meet some old Moscow geezer at that funeral? Did she imagine herself a femme fatale? And for the sake of tolerating these antics, He had been inventing excuses not to see Sarah for the entire last month? Well, what a fool he was after this. "Sarah, darling, what are your plans for today?" David asked softly a couple of minutes later, sighing resignedly into his mobile. Eleanor was seen off at the station by her mother and Martha. Without coordinating, they weren't in a hurry to leave, watching the train for a long time, even after neither noise nor trace of it remained on the horizon. "Maybe we should buy a pirojok, Martha?" Mom suggested hesitantly to her friend. "Or do you also think station pirojki are poison? In my time, they were called sick makers." "Oh, Aunt Jenny," Martha confessed. "I love sick makers." Eating the pirojki wrapped in flimsy napkins, they talked about Eleanor. "I would never have thought our Ellie was so courageous," Martha continued her confessions. "And you were much livelier in school." "I'm only livelier for show, but in reality, I'm just louder, like an empty drum," Martha laughed. "I'm even scared to think what I would do if I got into a situation like Eleanor's. I would definitely have thrown a silly, loud tantrum, giving my husband reason to be glad that such a hysterical woman was leaving him. After all, if a girl is hysterical, it means she's still hurt. I wouldn't have been able to play the part of a carefree heiress who doesn't care about her husband. But Eleanor could. Yes, but in reality, it was very hard for her. I know that." Aunt Jenny sighed. "The only hope is that the change of scenery will help her clear her head." She had long dreamed of traveling, but something always got in the way. David was always content with fishing trips and visits to friends' dashas. Leo is sent to sports camps, and my daughter just kept putting off her own life. "See how lucky it is that grandmother decided to leave everything to Eleanor," Martha picked up. "And what if your Queen of Spades was a real witch and foresaw and knew everything?" "Beatrice could do that," Aunt Jenny nodded with a smile. She had never felt dislike for her mother-in-law, and now she remembered this original personality even more. How did Beatrice manage it? She always did everything her own way, only considered herself. But no one was angry with her, and all her ex-husbands wished her a happy new year. A witch, definitely a witch. Eleanor, funny to say, was traveling in a compartment carriage for the first time in her life. She handled the journey perfectly, was absolutely unpretentious, not demanding of comfort. She liked fellow travelers, as long as they weren't aggressive. But suddenly, out of sheer curiosity, she decided to travel to Moscow in a compartment. It wasn't such an exorbitant price. She wasn't planning on strolling through expensive boutiques and social events in Moscow. She would indeed attend to her affairs, and in her free time, she would walk around places she knew by reputation from her favorite Bulgakov's descriptions. She definitely had to walk around Patriarch Ponds. Someday. She also wondered that day, when they met, if her father were alive, would Beatrice have left the inheritance to her son, not her granddaughter? You could never say anything for sure about her. None of Eleanor's acquaintances had or have such an unpredictable grandmother. That's a fact. It was holiday season, so the carriage was full. From the departure station, a very young couple in love and a silent man around 40 were traveling in Eleanor's compartment. The couple was occupied with each other and didn't stay put, and Eleanor was grateful to the man for being as engrossed in his thoughts as she was, and for being able to be almost invisible. A funny ability for such a tall and lanky person. Such people should probably be noisy in a cramped space like a compartment. Eleanor glanced back a couple of times, as if to make sure he wasn't watching her, and continued thinking about her own affairs. The further she got from her town, the lighter her heart felt. Long journeys generally calmed her down a lot. I wonder if there were any gypsies in their family. I should ask Mom. Are you being met? The compartment neighbor asked politely when there were about 15 minutes left until Moscow. Can I help you with your luggage to a taxi, for example? I hardly have any luggage myself, just a light sports bag with summer clothes. Eleanor smiled carelessly. I'm traveling on business, so I will be met. Yes, but thank you for the offer. Imagine, they had only exchanged a few words during the whole journey, and the person was offering help. At first glance, Jenny really turned out to be right. She left behind the house she had recently considered her own. In Beatrice's spacious apartment, which she had initially firmly intended to sell, she settled in. Why such grand quarters, if for that money you could buy 2 cozy little apartments? But now she wanted to get rid of Beatrice's apartments less and less. Here was a beautifully appointed classical kitchen dining room. In old films, people sipped tea from Chinese porcelain in such dining rooms. Incidentally, suitable porcelain was also available. There were also living rooms with a piano and excellent reproductions of famous paintings, the mistress's bedroom resembling a boudoir, and a study combined with a library. On the way to Moscow, Eleanor thought it would be uncomfortable, perhaps even spooky, to settle here alone, and yet the idea of moving to a hotel lingered. To her own great surprise, Eleanor immediately felt at home in this apartment. She was even more astonished when she began to understand that she and Beatrice had quite a lot in common. Eleanor wouldn't want to change the curtains on the windows, nor the dishes, nor the paintings and photographs on the walls. Even the books in the library that she managed to look at seemed to have been chosen with her taste in mind. Eleanor walked around the house, sat down in the armchairs, and mentally thanked Beatrice. The attractive studio with modern renovations, also part of Eleanor's inheritance, was rented by a young married couple, nice people who spent most of their day at work. Eleanor gladly assured them that she wasn't planning to sell the property, raise the rent, or look for new tenants, and set off for the dacha. Eleanor herself, and her parents too, had never had any dachas, and no one complained that they lacked one. Eleanor's father, Michael, said that in a small green town surrounded by forests and lakes, it was funny to stay in one place when you could discover new corners of nature every weekend. And they did just that as a family. But Beatrice did have a dacha. And, as Martha correctly guessed, there was no talk of vegetable patches there. A vegetable garden and Beatrice. That's even ridiculous to imagine. Beatrice's dacha resembled a refuge from the hustle and bustle of the world. In the depths of the old apple orchard, overgrown with tall grass, stood a not very well-maintained, but solid 2-story country house, old-fashioned, resembling a small estate. Inside, it turned out to be much cozier than outside, astonishing with its cleanliness and tidiness. The lawyer accompanying Eleanor, Mr. Thompson, even quietly apologized, noticing her surprise. Did I really forget to mention that Beatrice's housekeeper, Olga, lives in the house? Former now. Forgive me. Here she is, coming out to meet us. Good afternoon, Eleanor said, somehow embarrassed, as soon as she saw the woman coming down the stairs towards them. Hello, she responded with a friendly, warm smile. My name is Olga Peterson. Did you have a good journey? Perhaps some tea, coffee, or something stronger? Eleanor, the bewildered Eleanor introduced herself. Sorry to bother you. I thought no one lived here anymore. But what about you? Eleanor didn't know how to phrase the question that immediately came to mind correctly so as not to offend the woman, and fell silent, choosing her words. Don't worry, Olga Peterson assured her, figuring everything out immediately, almost cheerfully. Everything is fine. I'll tell and explain everything now. Let's go to the dining room. And she went ahead, leading Eleanor and Mr. Thompson with her. Olga Peterson was immediately likable. An energetic lady in her 60s, strong and fit, radiating friendliness and warmth. Which of you is driving? She winked, immediately opening a carved wooden box. I can offer the passenger some of my signature cranberry liqueur. Beatrice really appreciated it. I'm a perpetual passenger, Eleanor smiled. I don't drive. Treat me then. I call Beatrice Stanislavovna. I've gotten used to it over many years. If it's unpleasant for you, I can do as is proper. No, call me as you're used to, Eleanor hastened to reassure her. I'm sorry. I really didn't know you were staying here after grandmother's death. No one told me anything. Who is paying you? You're maintaining such exemplary order. How much do I owe you? Oh, Olga Peterson laughed, touched. And what about me not paying anything for accommodation here, and breathing in these grand quarters, this fresh apple orchard? Didn't you think you could also expect payment from me for this? Actually, Beatrice left me some money, and it's not a small sum for me. Wasn't Olga Egorenko mentioned in the will? That's me. Don't you remember who got what anymore? I wasn't paying attention, Eleanor admitted. Now that's a generous girl, a true aristocrat, Olga Peterson praised her. Anyway, seriously, I really live here like in a sanatorium. There are shops with the essentials nearby, 2 of them, and what they don't have, neighbors from town bring me. The neighbors are good, sociable and calm. They don't interfere in anything. And our plots aren't cramped, as you can see. Just tell me, Eleanor darling, by what date I should vacate the house, and when it will be convenient for you to show and tell you everything. I can do it right now, but it's up to you. And where will you go if... Eleanor didn't finish. Well, I'm not the court of Madrid to have such secrets, Olga Peterson assured her, almost cheerfully. I'll go to my daughters in Vladimir. There's room, my son-in-law is good. I won't be a surprise for them. I would have returned there in my old age anyway, everyone knew that. Of course, if Beatrice had lived longer in this world, I would have worked for her for another 10 years. Although Olga Peterson was both discerning and talkative, Eleanor understood that the woman didn't want to leave this house. I would gladly provide you with such an opportunity, Eleanor admitted, but I'm not the type of person who needs to hire domestic staff. I even know how to do renovations myself. I had to learn. Specialists charge a lot. Forgive me. What apologies, my dear girl. Olga Peterson became emotional again. But I would advise you not to decide what to do with all the property right away. Think about it a little. Another month or 2 will pass, the initial bewildered emotions will subside, and everything will fall into place in your head. I absolutely agree, Mr. Thompson chimed in approvingly. When there's no urgent need for money, that's how you should proceed. That's what I'll do. Thank you all, Eleanor decided cheerfully. And let's walk around the house then. Will there be apples there too? Plenty, Olga Peterson assured her. I do take care of the trees. Mr. Thompson asked permission to stay in the garden in an old rattan armchair, have a smoke, and make a couple of business calls, while Olga Peterson began showing Eleanor her new possessions like a seasoned estate guide. I don't know what I'll sell now, Eleanor said, half in jest, half seriously. I like grandmother's apartment, and this house is also to my liking. And the money the tenants pay for the studio is what I earn in a month at my job in my town. That's what I'm talking about. You have something to think about. Olga Peterson waved her hand. And what if, while you're thinking, I find tenants for this house? How do you feel about that? Eleanor asked, the thought suddenly occurring to her. You're the owner. It's up to you to decide. Olga Peterson didn't immediately grasp. You didn't even ask me. No, you didn't understand, Eleanor explained. If I ask you to stay here, look after the house, and keep it clean for the tenants, would that suit you? They will pay me rent, I'll pay you a salary from that money, and the house won't be abandoned while I sort out my affairs and problems. My father said that a private house shouldn't be left without people. It deteriorates and falls apart faster that way. Your father is right, Olga Peterson declared, pleased to have found a like-minded person. Houses aren't little apartments in an anthill, a human hill. They are like that. They have their own soul. And I won't be coy. Such an offer would suit me very well. Only you understand, Eleanor darling. There's a delicate point here. I'm also a living person. I have to like your tenants. And I also shouldn't be repulsive to them. For the position of a housekeeper, this is an important point. In an office, you can still not care about anyone and just earn money. But here, it's close proximity, living under one roof. I wouldn't even think of letting someone in who is unpleasant to you, Eleanor said, surprised. I'll send everyone here so you can look at each other and decide if this is necessary for all of you or not. You agree? That you've decided to rent out the house just like that? Seriously? Olga Peterson was taken aback. And why? Is it a bad decision? I must do something, bring some order, during this visit. Otherwise, it will turn out that I just took a trip to clear my head. And why not? Sometimes you need that too, with the conviction of her interlocutor. To rest from work, from household chores. Forgive me for an indiscreet question. Do you have a family? I have a son, I have a mother. I also have a husband. He still thinks he exists, but for me, he's almost an ex. Oh, I see, Olga Peterson commented cautiously, looking at Eleanor sympathetically, but didn't dare to ask further. Eleanor herself suddenly wanted to tell this woman everything in brief. Ordinary infidelity. He met someone else, wanted to leave the family. I accidentally overheard my David telling his mother that he had chosen to live with the one he loved, and his mother was persuading him to wait, in case I got a good inheritance. Her son is a sellout. He even resented what an honest guy his mother took him for. What an honest guy I was married to. Is that what you thought? Olga Peterson asked again. Uh-huh, Eleanor confirmed. But it turned out I was mistaken. Perhaps the guy couldn't handle the scale of my inheritance. Neither I nor he nor anyone from our families had ever been particularly wealthy. He became an attentive family man, straight home after work, weekends only with the family. He decided to leave his love. I see him wandering around sadly, but he's holding on. Good for him. We could use a new car, he says. There. Mr. Gigolo. Olga Peterson shook her head, so artistically that Eleanor couldn't help but smile. And you decided not to tolerate this scoundrel? Uh-huh. I decided to free him from forced lying. He could have come to hate me so much in a few years that he would poison me, like in old English detective stories. Eleanor snorted. And you're a clever girl, Olga simply approved. I would do that. Have you said goodbye to him completely, or just left to think everything over for now? For now, I just left. I just presented him with the fact in the evening that I would leave in the morning. I wanted to see his reaction. It was interesting. I saw. Now I'm even more sure of my decision. I'll return by the time my son comes back from sports camp and announce to David that I've found someone else here. Let him prepare for divorce. And he doesn't exist yet, of course? Eleanor laughed in surprise. Why, of course, she snorted. Such a charming girl is unlikely to go unnoticed even for a day. And I'm not flattering you. Female laughter. Mr. Thompson emerged from behind a shaggy currant bush. Ms. Eleanor, forgive me for tearing you away from pleasant company, but I'm being met at the station. If we can leave for town in about half an hour, we'll have time to discuss everything on the way. Talk about our next steps. I'll take you directly to your house. All right, Mr. Thompson, Eleanor assured him. I've already decided everything. We can go right now. Or if you like, you can stay here, Olga Peterson suggested. No plans for the evening. There's fresh bedding. The guest bedroom is in perfect order, like in a luxury hotel. And in the morning, after you've slept well, you can calmly return to town. How does my plan sound? Well, it's a good plan, Eleanor approved. I would have been too shy to invite myself, but I'm glad for the invitation. I've become quite impudent with you. But you're at your own home, Olga Peterson reminded her, tapping her forehead. And both women said almost in unison, Go ahead, Mr. Thompson. Very, very long ago, perhaps in childhood, Eleanor had slept as soundly as she did that night on the veranda of her country house near Moscow. Olga Peterson offered to make up beds for her in any room of her choice, especially urging her towards the beautiful guest room, which indeed resembled a cozy room in a country hotel, but Eleanor chose the veranda. "It's cooler here and the windows are huge. You'll be able to see the stars," she explained. Eleanor didn't get a chance to admire the stars. She quickly fell asleep after a long and pleasant day. And in the morning, having returned to the city, she sat down to draft an advertisement for a real estate website about renting out the country house with the services of a live-in housekeeper and a large plot occupied by a picturesque garden. She pondered how best to phrase the requirements for tenants, and suddenly flinched at a phone call. It was David calling. "Completely abandoned the family?" he asked immediately instead of a greeting. "Hi," Eleanor replied with friendly indifference. "Why abandoned? I call Leo at camp every day, morning and evening, and send photos from Moscow and messages. He's doing great, but you probably know that yourself. You do talk to him too, don't you? And you have nothing to talk about with me anymore? And do you have anything to talk about with me?" Eleanor smiled into the receiver. "I've been busy with affairs all these days, sorted some things out, decided some things already. But you know what? I'll tell you about it at home, I guess. I won't linger here. I'll come back earlier if there are tickets for tomorrow. I'll take one for tomorrow. There's no point in delaying." "So everything is fine?" David asked, deciding to restrain his irritation. "Completely fine," Eleanor confirmed. And indeed, she immediately bought a train ticket, not for tomorrow, but for the day after tomorrow. She informed Mr. Thompson about the train. He assured her that she could leave with a light heart. Her personal presence in Moscow wasn't needed for now. The only thing was she sure she could completely trust someone with something like choosing tenants for the Dasha? She wondered. Usually no, but sometimes it happens. Well, as a last resort, in the modern world there are video calls. If someone needs to move in very urgently, you can get some idea of the people that way. And I'll also help you with my trained eye, give you my assessment, and if necessary, I'll quickly draw up a contract. It's a standard one. I'll also consult with Olga Peterson if anything, Eleanor added. That's also a sound idea. Women in her profession often give a correct assessment of people. A good housekeeper isn't just waving a broom, as some snobs think. Eleanor had nothing to add to this remark. She had never had to be either a housekeeper or a snob. She called a taxi and went to say goodbye to Olga Peterson. She still needed to arrange how they would choose tenants, as Eleanor didn't particularly like sharing her thoughts on the phone. She preferred in person. "Eleanor, darling, don't worry," Olga Peterson assured her. "If we really come across decent people who are also willing to pay such a price, I won't let them get away. I'll convince them they won't find a better option. I can also sit and play with children well, although I do get tired of wild ones. And as a cook, I'm not bad, if of course people aren't used to gourmet cuisine. Artichokes with anchovies every day. Maybe I won't cook like in the best houses in Paris, but my pies and borscht are excellent. I won't be modest." "Yes, I understood right away that you are a treasure," Eleanor laughed. "No, the treasure here is you," Olga Peterson objected passionately, as if someone was about to argue with her. "You're offering me to continue working for the same salary that Beatrice paid me, in the environment I'm used to. Otherwise, I would have had to lead a completely retired life. And I don't want to spend the finances that Beatrice bequeathed to me on myself. I'd rather help my daughter's family. And I'll earn for myself for now. I go on holiday to the sea every year during the velvet season. I would be sad without the sea. So, Eleanor darling, thank you, and I'll try to justify your trust. And why do you look so tired?" "I'm not tired. I'm just a little afraid of returning home," Eleanor admitted. "I've decided everything, and now I'm scared. I'm used to not quarreling with anyone, not getting involved in adventures. And now I'm pretending to be a fiery redhead, a decisive heiress, but I'm just an ordinary provincial coward. Well, you're a storyteller, Olga Peterson admired. With your idea of telling your husband, you're like a spitting image of Beatrice. She also loved to invent things about herself, and everyone believed her, and everything worked out perfectly. So I'll be waiting for you here with your son and mother, and holding on to decent tenants so they don't slip off the hook. Eleanor decided to inform David about the time of her arrival. Her plans didn't include meeting Sarah, who might well be in the apartment alongside David. "Meet you at the station?" David asked. "No need. I don't have heavy luggage. I'll get there myself. Thank you for your concern." There were notes of sarcasm in David's voice, but now they only made Eleanor smile. The morning before leaving, she called her mother and warned her that she would come to stay with her for the night and would live with her until she moved into Beatrice's apartment. "Are you absolutely sure you've decided?" Mom exhaled. "But what if Leo doesn't want to?" "Mom, let's talk at home." The apartment, which Eleanor had so recently considered her home, greeted her with dirty floors and a pyramid of dirty dishes in the kitchen sink. A couple of fat flies circled above the pyramid, eagerly looking for something to feast on, while another pair crawled across a frying pan with leftover fried potatoes. "Hi." "It's cozy here," Eleanor announced, with no hint of hysteria, almost cheerfully. "Hi," her husband replied from behind the computer. "As best I could after work, in my wife's absence." Eleanor shrugged. "If you like it, it's your business," Eleanor replied friendly. "And what about you? Aren't you the mistress here anymore?" And suddenly, as if understanding something from his wife's gaze, David abruptly changed his tone. "All right, Jenny darling, we've had our fun. The boss has worn everyone out. With this attitude, I'm seriously thinking of quitting. As I understand it, we're not hard up right now. There's time to find a decent job." "Yes, I understand everything, David. I'm exactly the same. If it weren't for this unexpected inheritance that fell on me, I wouldn't have dared to leave a job I didn't love. After all, stability can be much worse than people usually reassure themselves it is. I'll take a shower now, change, and go quit." "Your leave just started. We could have gone somewhere," David reminded her with bewilderment, clearly not understanding where the conversation was heading. "I'm not a viper in the grass," Eleanor explained. "My boss didn't do anything bad to me for me to do such a thing to him. By the time my leave officially ends, he can find someone else for my position." "But everyday matters can wait, Ellie darling. If you're talking about the mess in the house, yes, I admit I'm guilty. You've never been a nag and never drove me crazy over trifles. And I'm not going to change now," Eleanor confirmed. "Anyway, it's pointless to prepare for such announcements for a long time. It's better to be immediate and honest. We should get a divorce, David." Her husband got out of the computer chair with an unexpected crash. "So is that a condition of the will, or something?" he asked with a smirk, hiding his irritation. "David, I wouldn't joke about this if you knew me at all. I've met another man and I don't want to live a double life." "And carefree heiresses like sweet boys?" Her husband sneered dismissively, faking a saccharine smile. "What kind of boys?" Ignoring the sarcasm, Eleanor continued. "And Madam now moves in circles where it's indecent to have husbands like me. Only those with status are valued." "David, I'm not insulting you and I hope for understanding. I've simply met someone else. The same thing could have happened to you. I'm claiming absolutely nothing. I'll only take mine and Leo's things, clothes, and toys." David shook off his mocking macho pose and stared at his unperturbed wife, suddenly realizing in an instant that she wasn't joking. He exhaled his last vengeful trump card. "You won't get anything for the child from me." It was already past midnight, discussing her divorce and resignation announcements with Martha and her mother. Eleanor smiled sadly. I never would have thought it would be harder for me to upset my boss than my own husband. I thought the hardest question would be about our son. But David only remembered Leo in connection with money, when he said he wouldn't give anything for him. Well, he'll have to pay alimony by law anyway. Martha sighed mockingly. Don't play dumb. You understand perfectly well that I'm not talking about that. Eleanor waved away. If it weren't for this inheritance, I would never have found out what kind of person I had lived with for 12 years. That's what scares me. Generally, into what relationships? Oh, girls! Mom, like an arbiter, took both of their hands. Then none of us should get involved in anything. When we love, we all want to believe in the best. And we do believe. Otherwise, life on the planet would have died out long ago. Ellie, Aunt Jenny, let's just skip the complicated philosophy for once. Martha smiled forgivingly. You're lucky, Eleanor darling, that you not only found out David's true nature, but also left him yourself, without damage to your self-esteem. Now he has one consolation left, to invent a beautiful legend for Sarah that he left you for love. I truly don't care about that, Eleanor waved away. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I promised my boss to stay for a maximum of a week before quitting. He wants me to hand over affairs to a new employee. It seems he already has someone in mind. I agreed. A week isn't a year. And I'll go back to Moscow to look for tenants for the dacha and a good school for Leo. I still need to think about how to prepare him, what to say. I'll help, Mom assured her. I'll come up with something too, Martha promised. As Eleanor somehow foresaw, there weren't many people willing to rent such a large house. For the summer, a small house in a gardening cooperative is enough for people, Olga Peterson said understandingly. And in winter, not everyone is ready to live outside the city. If it weren't for my salary, you could lower the price, and tenants would be found right away. I feel like I should get ready to go to Vladimir. Eleanor darling, if you miss your daughter and want to leave, just say so. Olga Peterson, Eleanor said, you told me honestly right away that you would work for another 10 years. Olga Peterson sharply changed course again. But so far, we haven't come across a single noblewoman ready to pay extra for a house with a housekeeper. Let's wait a bit longer. Not much time has passed at all. It's too early to draw conclusions. And Olga Peterson meekly agreed to wait. Eleanor stayed sometimes with her in the country, sometimes in the city apartment, walked around the city, filmed videos for Leo, whom his grandmother was supposed to bring to Moscow soon as his camp session ended. Leo was sad that his dad had almost stopped calling. A week after Eleanor left, Patricia Ann called with the aim of expressing everything she thought about their immoral little family. It turned out that Jennifer had once married a metropolitan golden boy, hoping for a beautiful life, but miscalculated. But her daughter decided to make up for both of them. No sooner had she received her grandmother's inheritance than she mercilessly threw out of her life her unimpressive, but honest and decent husband and the father of her child. Her newfound status didn't even stop her from doing this. Eleanor's mother's voice was understanding, though tired. And Eleanor, immediately after talking to her mother, dialed her mother-in-law's number. Patricia Ann, if you are overwhelmed by emotions, express them to me, not my mother. She has absolutely nothing to do with this story. Even better, shift your attention to your son. A strange silence from her mother-in-law ensued. And suddenly a silly, childish prank came to Eleanor's mind, and she added after the prolonged pause, "Do you really think I don't have the means for a private investigation? This is regarding your son's honesty and decency." Patricia Ann said goodbye in confusion. But now she definitely won't bother Mom. Eleanor justified her invention. "We've got a long-term tenant lined up here," she announced in a lively voice. "He couldn't reach you. It was busy. So he called me. He asked when he could come to see the house. He asked relevant questions, wasn't scared by the price, polite. I remembered you were coming to me for lunch tomorrow and took the liberty of setting a time for him myself, 2 hours before lunch. Did I do the right thing? Or should you call him back and change the time? We won't change anything, you did well. I'll come earlier, Eleanor promised. Lately, so many events had happened in what was once her unhurried life in such a short time that Eleanor wasn't at all surprised by the new little surprise. When the man wishing to rent Beatrice's picturesque dacha stepped out of the car, Eleanor recognized in him her fellow traveler, the silent compartment neighbor who had offered her help with her luggage when she was traveling to Moscow after the memorable conversation she had overheard at the hospital. The fellow traveler also immediately recognized Eleanor, smiled in surprise, and instantly became flustered. I remember you, he said just in case, as if Eleanor might not have noticed. My name is Arthur. I need a house. Everyone needs a house, Eleanor smiled. How many of you are there? Just one of me, Arthur replied. I already understood from the description on the website that here. Arthur explained that he was an architect and landscape designer, had his own bureau, had been working remotely with Moscow for a long time, visited often, and had even managed to buy an apartment here. Only it had remained empty all these few years. Mom absolutely didn't want to move to Moscow, so I stayed with her. She wasn't the kind of person to live alone after Dad died. And I didn't need to. I'm mobile. I'd come to the capital on business trips, did everything, and left again. And recently she passed away. I decided to move here permanently. And suddenly I realized I'm not an apartment person. I want to live in a house outside the city. I bought a plot of land, and I'm building myself a small house with a pond there according to my own design. And while it's being built, I decided to rent accommodation. Olga Peterson immediately and unconditionally liked Arthur, and she invited him to lunch directly. Eleanor and I are actually about to have lunch here, and we don't intend to go hungry and wait for you to leave. So, welcome to the table. I can't refuse such an honest and heartfelt invitation. Arthur was delighted. It's such happiness. A house with its own Mrs. Hudson. After lunch, having agreed on the time for signing the contract, Eleanor walked the tenant to the gate and couldn't resist a remark. On the train, you seemed like a very quiet person, but now it turns out it's the opposite. Yes, I'm a chatterbox, Arthur admitted with a smile, when not at work. And you seemed very focused on the train then, immersed in serious problems, so I didn't bother you with conversation, although I really wanted to get acquainted. Yes, you are perceptive. You are a dangerous person. Eleanor also couldn't help but smile. Now is a much better time. Back then, I really wasn't up for anything or anyone. A year later, having come to visit her daughter and grandson in Moscow, Jennifer, chuckling good-naturedly, told Eleanor simple news about mutual acquaintances. I don't know from whom, but Patricia Ann heard that you were really going to marry a gentleman from the capital, that I was invited to the wedding, and then she just exploded. Is she calling you again? No, when she sees me, she crosses the street altogether. My friend Iris, it turns out, works with her new daughter-in-law, Sarah. She says it's sad to look at Sarah now. Her mother-in-law told her to her face that she had ruined her son's whole life, that he could be living in a huge apartment or a mansion of his choice in Moscow now. But because of Sarah, the family destroyer, he is now forced to languish his whole life. In short, Patricia said a lot of nonsense in her usual style. Everyone now sympathizes with Sarah, of course, except for those who gloat that she shouldn't have gotten involved with a married man. I'm on the sympathetic side, Eleanor announced. If it weren't for Sarah, I wouldn't have met Arthur.